So Donald Trump's government shutdown continues, and now we're learning how many billions it's going to cost. And Federal Chair Jerome Powell just announced that the Fed is cutting rates. I want to give you the latest, and let's just jump right in. So this is the headline then. Fed cuts rates again as shutdown cloud view of economy. So we're not going to be getting data as the government is shut down. Plus, the economy is looking really weak, and the Fed is in a real bind. In terms of cost, we're looking at maybe up to $14 billion, possibly more. I know it says up to, but let me read it. It says government shutdown could cost the U.S. economy up to $14 billion. That's coming from the Congressional Budget Office, but it depends how long this thing goes. So a 6-week shutdown will cost the economy $11 billion, and an 8-week shutdown will cost the economy, right, $14 billion. So depends how long this thing goes. I'll just say this, it looks ugly. I checked the rhetoric on both sides. It doesn't seem to be any movement, but we'll see, because the pain is real. I'm sure you know this, right? U.S. government shutdown clouds economic outlook. Now, let me read a quote here. Quote, the longer the shutdown continues for, the more we worry about those permanent effects on the economy. That's coming from a chief economist over at Citibank. And then you just have this problem. Unpaid government workers and contractors have been dialing back spending, right? That slows down everything, which will eat into fourth quarter GDP. JP Morgan estimates that every week the government is shuttered, about 0.1% is shaved off of growth, right? Someone's not working. Someone's not going out to a restaurant. Someone at the restaurant then has no business. The boss tells people just go home. And that basically model will ripple through multiple businesses sectors in the USA. This is where we're at. And then the Fed's in a bind because let's say you're only worried about jobs, right? Which the job market's been looking weak. Then you cut rates to try to encourage business activity. But then you got runaway inflation and the tariffs are still ongoing. The courts haven't quite ruled on that one yet. The lower court said it's illegal, but we'll see what the Supreme Court ends up saying. But inflation, right, that's causing costs to go up on several things. And basically, like, if they like cut too much, then you're just going to have endless printing, which I think there's a possibility. I think there's a possibility of that. Let me go through what the Fed said, and we'll jump into this. It says, Federal Reserve trims U.S. interest rates by quarter point, but casts doubt on November cut. Okay. And there was a key thing here with this was the vote. A lot of times that this is unanimous, but I think it was a 10-2 vote this time. So Fed cut rate again, but Powell raises doubts about easing at next meeting. And it says by a vote of 10-2. So that means 2 dissented. And a lot of times these things are unanimous, but not this time around. You got one of Trump's people that wants a bigger cut, and you got someone else saying, no, we should just hold. So it's not unanimous. The Federal Reserve cut interest rates by a quarter point on Wednesday, but warned further reduction this year was not, quote, a foregone conclusion as the government shutdown clouds the outlook. They're not going to have data. We're worried about the future, right? Concerns about weak job growth, not good, coupled with signs of funding tightness in money markets prompted the Fed to move to halt efforts to shrink its balance sheet. And I'm honestly wondering if we're back to printing again. I'm starting to wonder that. And I'm not saying that's the right decision. I wonder if that's what they're going to do. Because if you're worried about, credit markets freezing up and you're worried about just no one doing anything, and remember much of the U.S. economy is based on debt and people shopping, keep the money flowing, but you're also dealing with the government shutdown, which the Fed can't really do anything about. That's not their, in their wheelhouse, which adds to unemployment. You want to get jobs going. I'll just say this: I think unemployment and inflation are going to keep ticking up. That's just my opinion on that stuff. I think growth is going to slow, but I also think you're going to be in a real bind. So you're probably looking at stagflation. So high unemployment, high interest rates, little to no growth, could even go in decline. I mean, let's see. We got to get out of the shutdown first before we can even assess this, and then we'll read more from the Fed here. Quote, a further reduction of the policy rate at the December meeting is not a foregone conclusion. Okay. And, Wall Street, they just want lots of, cheap money to borrow and keep everything going, right? Everything on leverage. Quote here, I always say that it's a fact that we don't make decisions in advance. Okay. But I'm saying something in addition here that it's not to be seen as a foregone conclusion. In fact, far from it. Okay. And then when you look what's sort of driving the economy at the moment, driving the markets, it's all this AI hype. And Nvidia's they're still doing great, I guess. $5 trillion. Nvidia becomes the first $5 trillion firm as AI rally picks up steam. But in the same day, right, as we've been talking about, you have layoffs. And so like how do we reconcile the current economy that we're in? You got government shutdown, so workers aren't getting paid. That's, bleeds into several sectors, right? As people are like, I just don't feel confident. We saw consumer confidence go down the last 3 months. We talked about 4. Then you have this, tens of thousands of white collar jobs are disappearing as AI starts to bite. So companies are like, you know what? I'm really going to invest in AI. I'm really going to invest in that. Like, why deal with a bunch of, crying humans? Why do we want to bother the humans? And I laugh, but I know it's not funny. It's completely unsustainable when you take this whole system as taken all together. And you're also seeing a slowdown in automotive. This is General Motors just announced this because we were just talking about Amazon layoffs, UPS layoffs, Target layoffs, right? Now General Motors lays off more than 3,300 electric vehicle workers in U.S. plants. So this is Michigan, Ohio, and Tennessee. And the end of, because Trump ended EV tax credits and basically the cost of everything, these things are going to go up. And you have a slowdown in the economy. So higher costs on something, you're not going to buy it. Plus no job, you're not going to buy it. I mean, of course. And this is what it says. So not everyone's like permanently laid off. It just many. It says GM plans to lay off more than 3,300 hourly workers at plants across Michigan, Ohio, and Tennessee, starting in January. So that's coming. Of those, more than 1,700 are being laid off indefinitely, while more than 1,500 are expected to be called back in mid-2026. So I guess you're out of work for like 7 months or something, or a little bit longer. I mean, it's I don't know. I guess, well, I guess if the layoff starts January and you come back to work around June-ish, July, but and for those of you, and I know we have people in our community who work in or our family members that work in some of these plants, so I'd like to hear from you guys, because this is something that happens for many of these kind of workers. Sometimes they'll tell you to go home, they'll retool the factory, and you come back in like a month or something like that. But could be like a 6-month thing, plus along with the government uncertainty right now. And then Halloween's coming, and I saw this, and I think this is kind of representative of inflation and just representative of U.S. culture at the moment. Listen to this. Some people are spending $200 on Halloween candy, and others are skipping the holiday as, quote, greedy trick-or-treaters spoil the fun. And I've actually heard this before. So there's 2 things. So one is it's really expensive to do trick-or-treating, I guess, this year. And I'd be curious your guys' thoughts. How much do you spend on candy when kids come knocking on your door? And the other one was, is it true that when kids, grab out of the candy, are they like taking, 3 candy bars, 4 candy bars, or are they like, oh, your candy's too small, where's my full candy bar? I'd be curious. I've heard about this stuff. I have not witnessed it that myself. I haven't had to tell a kid, like, don't take too much. Usually I just hand it to the kid, but I guess sometimes there's some like, kind of greedy kids out there, which I know. It's you can all kind of imagine. And if you don't know trick-or-treating, it's basically people knocking on your door and ask for candy, right? Trick-or-treats. Some people do really good on this, on the Halloween stuff, when they, there's always a house in the neighborhood that has like a full haunted house in there. But maybe this year, because Halloween costumes with the tariffs from China, they talked about this before, like costumes, it costs a lot of money to do all this stuff. And then you just have like medical costs. This is another example of what it's like in USA right now. And I just want to, explore, like, imagine that you lost your job, or layoffs are coming, and then you get in a car accident or something. A car accident sent her to the hospital and $64,000 in debt. And I want to read the description of this, because I don't think people realize how bad it is right now. Physician Laura Hughes was heading to see her patients at a clinic about 20 miles from her Denver home in February when another driver that is, T-boned her Subaru, totaling it, right? So she got hit. She was taken to the ambulance to the hospital. It's Platte Valley Hospital. As Shaken Hughes was examined in the emergency room, where she was diagnosed with bruising, a cut on her knee, and a broken ankle. Okay? Physicians recommend immediate surgery. And you're like, okay, that's probably what you got to do if they're telling you to do it, right? Quote, they said, you have a fracture and a big gaping wound in your knee. We need to take you to the OR to wash it out and make sure there's no infection. As a clinician, I thought, yes. She was taken to the operating room in early evening, then admitted to the hospital overnight. A friend took her home the next day. Then the bills came. And again, the headline is $64,000 in debt. And when I see this kind of stuff, it just shows how the system's completely broken, right? And USA, and you think you guys know this. And this is what the shutdown is, a fight over healthcare. And I'm all for affordable healthcare. You don't want your citizens to just be like, I'm one car accident away from $64,000 in debt. It's crazy. And then you have this kind of stuff, which is also part of U.S. culture. I'm just telling you how the USA is. School staff testify they warned 6-year-old who shot teacher was a threat. This is back, I guess, 2003. Let me read the description of this one. It's just wild when you read the stuff that goes on in USA. One after the other, they settled into the witness chair on Tuesday and testified they told an assistant principal at Rich Neck Elementary School that a 6-year-old was a threat that day. You're like, hey, I got this first grader. It's a threat, The first grader teacher, the guidance counselor, the music teacher, and the reading specialist informed Ebony Parker that the boy might have a gun. And we're talking about first grader. Hours later, the boy would shoot his first grade teacher, Abby Zwirner, seriously injuring her. Some of those who tried to warn Parker cried on Tuesday during the first day of testimony in a $40 million civil lawsuit in Newport. Wow. Zwirner is suing Parker, who resigned after the shooting. And I'm laying this all out there because I think the situation in the USA where costs are elevated, people are losing their jobs, the government's still shut down. So let's say you have some sort of paperwork or fine that needs to be done, that's completely delayed, and you have current leadership in the White House and otherwise that just don't care about regular people and are completely disconnected. And I know it's frustrating. That's why I go through this stuff with you guys. I want you to know that you're not alone in this, and you're not the only one that can see it. I mean, this is where we're at. And the craziest thing about when I see the cost of the shutdown is like up to $14 billion, and depending how long this thing can go, is it's like at this point you would have been better off just funding the healthcare and just get the government back open again. But who listens to me? I mean, well, what do I know? What does math have to do with this? And it's I don't know. This is where you want to have honest conversations about this stuff. And in USA, it's because people were talking about this in the last video, and I just say the same thing. People are getting so used to in America that your news and what stuff you watch on YouTube is just a bunch of people yelling and fighting. And that's basically what it is. People don't actually talk about real numbers. It's just yelling and fighting. And it's not really about trying to figure out how to get stuff to work for everyone. It's more like, my team has to beat your team, and I'm going to keep yelling and you, whatever. And you see it all. You see it all over. And I just mentioned it because it's been weighing on my mind a lot lately. And I'm perfectly capable of yelling. Any of us can yell at any moment. It's actually quite easy, right? Donald Trump is trash. I hate Donald Trump. Right? I can do it. You can do it too. But I don't want to do that. I think it's foolish. I think that represents sort of where U.S. culture is at the moment, and sort of why people are in the predicament that they're in. And it's frustrating. It's easy to see from the outside, but when you're stuck in it, you just think, oh no, Chris, you're wrong. You just have to fight more. We have to scream louder, right? Screaming is the best medicine, but this is what's getting you into this predicament. The destruction of education, the destruction of basically just civil society, and it's really sad to see. And my opinion on this stuff is you need better leadership, which I think you already know, but you need it across the board, right? It's not just one person; it's across the board. And when I just see this kind of stuff, like the cost of the shutdown is going to end up costing more than say what the giving people food money is. It's ridiculous. So that's my thoughts on this. Guys, I'm frustrated like you are. And that's why I try my best to tell you what's going on and not try to, how can I say, tell you something that's rainbows and unicorns. I just want to tell you the truth on this stuff. So thank you for your time, and I'll catch you on the next video.